Everyone, it's Shannon here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In this video, I'm going to get really creative and share with you an idea for how you can stretch some of those holiday themed sets just by changing your color palette. This is the Merry Wreath combo set. It is obviously a Christmas set, but I love it so much it actually made my top 6 favorite Waffle Flower products. This is a layering set. You have 3 layers for the wreath, and it also have these beautiful solid kind of critters. They're really cute, and there's the matching dies in the back. I'm going to start with the leaf layer for this wreath. And if you notice, this wreath layer is around a bow. That is a key to kind of how you put this stamp back on the acetate, and I feel that that's important because it is the easiest way I found to make sure your layers line up perfectly. I'm just going to pull off this wreath right off the acetate and keep it in the same position that it was on the acetate. And you can even see me here, I'll line up the acetate with the wreath and they're all lined up perfectly. This is just going to make it super easy for me to line up my stamp layers if I just keep them the same way they were on the acetate. So I'm going to ink this up here with my first color. This is Fresh Pear. This is a pink fresh ink, a really beautiful, soft, minty kind of green. Then I'll stamp it. Now I'm going to do some partial inking to this stamp. I have key lime here, and I'm going to angle my ink pad so only a small amount of the ink pad comes in contact with the stamp. So just a small amount of this key lime is getting onto the stamp. And then after I ink it up, I'll then stamp it, and you'll see here it creates this kind of gradation and really adds to the natural look of the leaves. I'm now going to remove this stamp and place it back on the acetate. And because of that bow in the center, that wreath kind of fits just naturally around it, so it's really easy to always put it back on the acetate the same way, or the way it originally came. So now I just carefully pulled off this detail layer for the wreath, and I kept it the same way it was on the acetate and positioned it here over the wreath so everything was lined up. And I'm going to actually ink this up with a brown, and the brown's going to really mimic kind of the look of sticks and twigs and just kind of the look of a spring, like a spring branch where just barely some of the leaves are starting to grow back. So now I'm going to move on to my critter. Now for this critter, I have found it is much easier to start with the eye and nose layer. So the teeniest layer, which is kind of against what I typically do with layering stamp sets. I usually start with the biggest layer, but that eye and nose is kind of a spindly little stamp, so it's easier just to kind of get it down onto your MISTI and then stamp it, and then kind of work the critter, the large critter stamp around it. So I just inked it up and stamped it in Memento Tuxedo Black. Now I'm positioning the main body of the critter over that first layer, and now I'm going to ink it up with some really kind of deep oranges, because my interpretation of this critter is a fox. So I started with clementine and then stamped it, and now I'm going to move on to persimmon and again partially ink, so only a small portion of this really kind of deep rusty orange touches the critter. Now to kind of smooth and soften, I have a little foam dauber here, and I'm just going to go over those areas that I added that persimmon and just kind of soften that edge, and this is going to create a beautiful soft gradation of this color over the critter and really create the illusion of roundness. Now I'm going to move on to the bow and ladder that is also part of this Merry Wreath set. I'm going to first ink it up in sky blue, which is a really light blue, and then stamp it. And I'll actually stamp it twice just to make sure I have it really nice and bold and crisp, so I'm stamping it a second time. Now I'm going to do one more partial inking here. This is Summer Shower, just partially ink the ladder and the sides of the bow. Again, this will just add a little bit of kind of depth and make this kind of pop a little bit more. So now that I have all of my images stamped, I'm going to do a little bit of Copic Coloring. So if you remember, this Merry Wreath has 3 layers, but we left out the berry layer, and I did that because I wanted to ink up these little berries with a bunch of colors to really kind of set that spring feel. And the best way that I could come up with to do this was to use my Copics. I picked out basically a rainbow of really light spring Copic colors, 5 colors in total, and I just colored in those berries. And I really think that added a lot to the wreath. It really kind of gave it that Easter feel. So I went ahead and die cut everything out, including 3 eggs. The egg die is from the spring basket die set, and now I'm going to Copic color this scarf and hopefully make it look like a bow. I picked out 3 kind of pink colors here, and I'm just doing the best I can to kind of make this scarf look more like a ribbon tied around that little fox's neck. So now I'm going to move on to these eggs, and I'm going to use a pair of markers for each set or each egg, and I'm going to use Copics here just to keep kind of the colors consistent, that the kind of the same colors I used on the wreath, because I'm actually using one of the markers from each of the pair is one of the 5 markers that I used to color the wreath. And once I finish coloring those, I'm now going to move on to constructing my card base. I have an A2 top folding white card base here, and I'm going to adhere onto the front this pink panel. This panel is slightly smaller than an A2 panel. It is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And after I've adhered that, I'm now going to stamp my sentiment. The sentiment is from the Rejoice Rabbit stamp set. I'm going to do some heat embossing, so I first applied some anti-static powder. Now I'm going to ink up the stamp in Versamark ink, stamp it on the panel, and then I'm going to pour on some white embossing powder. Just tap off the excess, and then I'll heat set with my heat tool. And this is just going to work really well with, I think, our Easter spring card. So we are now ready to basically put this card together. I have foam squares on the back of the wreath and at the top of each one of the eggs. And I also want to add some dimension to the ladder, but the easiest way that I thought to do that was to die cut that little ladder again out of white craft foam and then adhere the white craft foam layer to our stamped layer. And that is just, I think, the simplest way when you have spindly kind of small die cuts. If you have a matching die, I would use that and cut it out of craft foam instead of trying to cut really small strips of foam tape. So now I've just removed the backing on the wreath, stuck the wreath in place, added the eggs. I'm going to add a little bit of liquid glue to the backside of this ribbon or bow, and then I will add some glue to the backside of our dimensional ladder, pop that up on the card a little bit under the wreath, and then I'll add a little bit of liquid glue to the backside of our cute little fox and put him down on the wreath and a little bit on the ladder as well. And that will actually complete the card. And I'll hold the card up to the camera so you can get a good look at some of the details in this card. Love all the depth in this beautiful layered wreath. And I really am so excited about trying it with different color combos, maybe even trying some fall colors and using it for fall. I just think this is such a fun idea to just play around with the stamp sets you already have, especially even those Christmas sets, and see if you can stretch them and make them work for different times of the year. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you want any more information on the products I use, please head over to Waffle Flower, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.